Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Real Hawk Talk. This is Brian Nemhauser, and we've got a bit of the Hawk Blogger crew tonight. Our our eternal optimist Evan is spreading his Seahawks good cheer in another continent today, so we'll miss him tonight and his food takes and sunny disposition. But we're always happy to have Nathan Ernst joining us. How you doing, Nathan?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing well, dude. Down here in a San Francisco hotel room with like super harsh lighting, so I'm sure I look even better than
You
normal.
look wonderful. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I don't have the smoke that you guys have to deal with right
We
now.
don't have that as much anymore.
Oh,
So
really? It's improved.
it's a lot better today. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting home tomorrow for a lot of reasons, and one of them would be it would be better certainly if it wasn't smoky. And then Jeff Simmons, just in time. Good to see you, dude.
I'm all right. I had some computer issues, and now I'm all settled.
Okay, well that's still to be determined. You were a little glitchy right there. We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah. Still?
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. So guys, a lot to talk about tonight. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to come up with your topic list, but I'll give you a little bit of a head start to think through that. And that first thing we have to talk about is Jon Ryan. Nathan always demands that we start every Real Hawk Talk by talking about punters, and in this case, it makes good sense. So I'd love to go around table on your favorite Jon Ryan memory, and let's start there.
Can we just skip to our second favorite? Because if we don't all have the same favorite, I'm gonna be concerned.
Okay. All right, that's fair. So why don't you name both, assuming that you have the same favorite? But yeah, that's a good point.
So the obvious right answer for favorite is the touchdown in the NFC Championship game against Green Bay. It was amazing. It kicked off the comeback. It gave us that wonderful picture of him looking terrified while he shot-putted the ball over to Gary Gilliam, and then he turned around and did the discount double check to Aaron Rodgers. It was I don't. There are a few people who have ever lived who have had a better moment than Jon Ryan had then. My second favorite moment is I feel bad on this one a little bit because I think he got hurt, if I remember right. But when he took off and ran, and Jon Ryan, for a punter, pretty athletic. But he took off and ran in was it the Cardinals game, or what game was it where he took off and ran and he bobbled the ball and then got killed on a hit. Him bobbling that ball mid-run was kind of amazing. I think everything else is punts, and punts are boring, so those have to be the top two.
Jeff, how about you? You got anything different than that?
Unfortunately, some of my favorite Jon Ryan memories are plays that didn't work out so well. There was one in that Vikings playoff game in the cold where Jon Ryan, I think it was a fake or it was a dropped hold where he ended up running up the middle and getting his face knocked in, bleeding everywhere. And then there was a play in this game a couple years ago where it was that Thursday night game where they first debuted those terrible green jerseys. And Ryan, I think, went for like a 33-yard run and then got completely clobbered. And I think the sidelines of both teams were going crazy. It was just, yeah, well, Nathan says great. Like, Ryan is not your typical punter. He's kind of athletic. For me, he was a Canadian friend. Jon Ryan came from the CFL, a league that I'm embarrassed to be in my country. But, yeah, just everything about Jon Ryan was different. He was probably one of the more popular punters in any franchise in the last decade.
Yeah, do you guys my recollection, and I was trying to get him on the show and it just didn't work out, but do you guys recall him being as fit when and as puffed up as buff as he ended up being when he started? I thought he was kind of average Joe looking guy, and then he got to be pretty athletic, and muscular.
Yeah, it might have happened. A friend of mine knew Dwayne Casey really well, and Dwayne Casey was the Toronto coach where I live. Yeah, and Casey was Ryan's next door neighbor in Seattle. Casey lives there in the off season. For a while, Casey was pretty worried about John's drinking habits. Not in a bad way, not in a bad, like a dangerous way. Just he liked to have fun. He didn't look like an athlete. But I think as the years went on, you can see he was a speedy guy. Like he was athletic. So maybe
the word was that he was a running back in Canada. Like he actually had experience running the ball. And that's my recollection is that he actually was not in particularly great shape when he came. He was more like punter, dad bod kind of thing, and then started to get kind of like ripped. But it's funny. I have to my favorite memories, besides the ones you guys mentioned. I mean, definitely him running and losing the ball. I don't think I've ever seen someone lose a ball that way. Like there was no reason for it to happen. I like turned to my son at that point and we were laughing. I mean, I felt so bad because he got destroyed, but like his face, I mean, his facial expressions on almost all of these things are like remarkable. And one of them that we didn't talk about is in a Bears game a few years ago where he punted the ball and this was not a fake, he punted the ball and I think Devin Hester was returning it. And Ryan was going down to try to make a tackle and just got blindsided. And there's just a crazy still image of him basically looking like at such a curved angle, like a body should not look like. And his face just with his lips in like different hemispheres. It was pretty bad. But, I think there's something about Jon Ryan that made him really appealing for a lot of fans. He's kind of like, and this is going to date me, but like he's kind of like the Winona Ryder, of the Seahawks, and that like people think that he's like they could do what he does. He's achievable. He's like attainable in some way, and so they relate to him on a personal level. He's still a professional athlete. Like he was still an amazing athlete that did amazing things that none of us would realistically be able to do. And if we'd had him on the show, I definitely would have wanted to ask him a little bit about Ninja Warrior and. I was disappointed for his showing there. That was the other highlight / low light. Did you guys actually see him on that, his attempt there?
No.
I didn't see it either.
Do you know do you know Ninja Warrior at all? And like
the first one is you have to like jump between the different things. You just kind of like skip almost across, right?
Right. It looks like anybody could do it, right? Yeah. He fell in at that point. So, that was not his best athletic showing. But anyway. Yeah. What other thoughts on the Jon Ryan stuff, Jeff? Other things you want to talk about there?
Yeah, I just want to I guess thank him, pay respect to him. Jon was such a likable guy. You don't see like veteran guys like Bobby Wagner or Russell Wilson talk about a punter very often. It seemed like everyone had a pretty good respect for Jon. And it's pretty cool he's back with Hauschka. It seemed like those guys were pretty close.
That is cool.
And I don't know. I remember when Hauschka ended up leaving in free agency, Jon had a pretty good tweet about holding his balls again. It was going to sad he can't hold his balls anymore. So now he's back. He gets to hold his balls again, and that was like a pretty cool thing for that they're back together.
I respond to that.
That was his tweet. I'm not saying it's weird.
Oh man, there was something I was. Oh. I think one of the things that's really stood out for me is how often do you see the franchise quarterback, the franchise like almost defensive player of the year, tweet out about the punter moving on? Like, I thought that was pretty cool that both of them talked about, took the time to send him off. So, huge impact on the team, the community. I know I've been actively looking for new fresh legs, and I'm excited about what Michael Dixon is going to do there. But Jon Ryan's been a great Seahawk, so it's I'm glad that he landed on his feet in Buffalo. So we are the day before the next game, and there's a ton of storylines. All sorts of things broke. One of the things that's like top of mind for me, and I'm curious I've been super busy and haven't been able to stay with all the press conferences and all that kind of stuff. But is Dion Jordan really have a chance to come back for the season opener? And like the news was that Pete said that there's a chance he'll be back for the opener, and that Jordan is pushing to come back earlier than that. I mean, that's a pretty significant impact if that's true on what they're going to do with the roster. Like someone's going to get left off that I think all of us had, Dion Jordan going on the PUP list. So any thoughts on that? Anything that you guys have read or what you think the implications there are?
I'm always going to bet against Dion Jordan's health, not in like a mean way or anything, but in a I don't like losing money kind of way. So it'd be cool if he's back. But that seems like I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Pete tends to be overly optimistic with injury timelines. I think it's a known thing around the fantasy football community and a known thing around the league. So sometimes when Pete says something, you might need to add like a couple weeks to his timeline. Maybe the most optimistic person. And when you combine that, as Nathan's saying, it seems like a long shot. But the fact that he's progressing, that's good news. But I think it'd be a pretty surprising turn of events if he's back for the opener.
Well, so that is that. I think that's all right. That's all makes sense. But what about? Does it change your opinion of the potential that they will not put him on PUP? Like maybe he's back by week 2 or week 3 instead of by week 6 or 7. Do you think? Let me put it this way. Nathan, do you think that Dion Jordan is important enough to the Seahawks that if he could be back by week 3, that you carry him on the roster and cut somebody to make space for him?
I haven't thought about who that cut would be, but yeah, I think if there's any chance that you can get, even if you think you can be back by week 4 or something like that, like, yeah, I think this team doesn't have a huge margin. And so every game matters, and, cutting a guy who is more likely than not to be inactive a lot of these games, if it means you can get Dion Jordan back a few weeks early, then I think you do it. I mean, you still have to be conscious of, not rushing him back and all that, especially with the kind of injury history that he's had. But I don't think this is a team that can. I mean, again, it depends on who the cut is, but I think this is a team, if they want to seriously try to compete and like that's an outside possibility still, then I think you take that risk and you roster him right out of camp if there's any indication that he'll be back.
Well, let's make it real. I mean, would you cut Poona Ford for Dion Jordan?
No, I'd cut Brandon Jackson for him.
Brandon Jackson.
Eric Walden, you can cut because Marcus Smith is gone now. That's a potential.
You need. I don't know that you can cut Eric Walden though, can you? Like I know he's brand new to the scene, but with the whole Marcus Smith thing.
Yeah, I guess you're hoping they can get by for a couple games until Jordan plays, but yeah, I don't know.
Even if Jordan is healthy for like week 1, like they got to keep Eric Walden, right? I mean, maybe they decide that Walden's washed and they got to keep another pass rusher though, right?
That's the question. I mean, you got Quentin Jefferson, you've got Rasheem Green, you've got Frank Clark, so you've got a 3-man rotation at the end, and you do have now Jackson and Walden, and then you've also got Jacob Martin
and Mingo.
Mingo.
Mingo's true. Yeah.
I think I would cut if I have real confidence that Jordan's going to come back and contribute, right? Like then to me it's a pretty easy decision. Like there's no one else. There's not a lot of guys I would keep on the roster over him. If you're gonna have to cut like a Quentin Jefferson, that's where to me it starts to get uncomfortable. I don't even know if I'd cut a Jacob Martin if that's somewhere that they'd have to do to make room for him. But
yeah, I mean, a lot of this could kind of if Puna really plays well the rest of the preseason, I'd almost be okay with cutting Steven. He's been okay, but he's just kind of a big body defensive tackle, and they've got Reed and they've got Puna and they've got, Naz and Quentin Jefferson, who are more of a 3-tech, but are fairly stout. So I don't know that you really need another just big body there. So, but that's more dependent on Puna. But that's a lot more seems a lot more palatable than losing a young guy like Ford.
And I think that's what makes this upcoming preseason game so interesting, because I think you want to see if Rasheem Green can play against maybe the starters on a team like Minnesota, who people consider a Super Bowl contender. And if you can start the year maybe with Rasheem Green, Rasheem's been dominating backups, but I think we all want to see how he does against the starting quality players, because there's such a gap league-wide from O-line. And if you don't have to rush Jordan back because Green can play, that really does help.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good news. But as you guys have said, Pete's tough to read on that. He has said he thought Doug Baldwin would be back for week 1, and it's looking like
seems like that's the case.
That's going to happen, maybe. So, I don't know. There's been a number of these things that, like Ed Dixon. I don't like the guy's never played with the team, and he's maybe your starting tight end on week 1. I don't know how that would look like either. Like, there's a lot of these guys that are kind of hanging on the edge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's shift the conversation a little bit. Last week, we were supposed to do a show earlier in the week, but things just didn't work out, so we didn't get a chance to break down too much of the Chargers game. So the biggest takeaway that most people, at least on Twitter, and Evan's not here to talk about it, but I would have liked to hear his response, but it was hard not to watch that game and notice Germain Ifedi in a tough way. And Germain had some early good flashes against Melvin Ingram, but had some like eye-opening bad plays. And just the end of the second quarter where they were trying to put together a 2-minute drive and they kept having to dump the ball off, I think Ifedi got beat on like 4 or 5 straight plays. It was hard to watch. So the big news coming out of Seahawks camp this week, I think we got to talk about this, is George Fant switching positions. We've heard mixed things about how P wanted him on the left side to keep it easy. He's coming off a serious ACL injury from last year. He's a very raw player, and he just learned left tackle going into last year, and now he's got to switch sides because Jamarco Jones, who was probably their best candidate to maybe compete with Ifedi, is probably out for quite a while. So, yeah, Fant to right tackle. Let's start with that. Nathan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I love it. I don't think there's any real downside. Like getting him competing on both sides of the line, that's something that they've wanted from their guys a lot, and they need the competition over there. Ifedi just has not shown the consistency in his performance and the consistency in his discipline when it comes to penalties and stuff. We're beating an old horse or a dead horse with Ifedi, right? So getting it's hard to think that Ifedi is part of their best 5. And it's good that we're going to get a chance to see, whether he is or not, and have that competition. So, I no complaints. We'll see what happens, but I think it's all good stuff.
Did you guys see Cliff Avrill's comments about Ifedi? I think they showed up in the paper that his impression was that he felt like he was entitled to that role, or that things were going to be given to him. It was pretty damning. I mean, Cliff Avrill's a very positive guy, says nice things. I don't know if some of that has to do with the fact that Ifedi got in fights with a lot of the defensive line and they just don't like him as a person, or if that's an accurate read that Avrill, like, there are some questions, and I've heard rumblings in that locker room that one of the things that really broke down in the last few years, and part of the reason there's been such a huge coaching shift, is there wasn't really a feeling that players were being held accountable at the same level. And that, a guy like Ifedi has not had to really earn that spot. He's just been given a starting role. And I do believe in the competition philosophy in that regard, that if you want to really bring out the best of a player, you have to have some threat that there's someone else pushing them. If they're just able, if you're depending on them pushing themselves and continuing to set the bar higher, I think it's less likely that that's going to happen. So I think an interesting subplot here is Ifedi and Fant. From when I've seen them and talked to them, they're best buddies. I think they might be roommates. They like spend all their time together. So that's an interesting part of this. I'm always fascinated by and surprised at how mature these players end up being when their livelihoods are at stake, in terms of really supporting each other and not not really trying to sabotage one of their teammates.
Okay, here's a question for you, Brian. Week 1, who do you want to be the starting right tackle?
I would love it to be George Fant. I mean, I really would. I think one of the things that I was tweeting about earlier this week was Pro Football Focus, and yes, their grades are good or bad, or what people take it for what it's worth. But Ifedi was, he is one of the, again, most poorly graded right tackles in the whole league. I don't think anyone's arguing with that, other than maybe the Seahawks and Ifedi. But Fant's graded higher overall, but he is, I think, the second to last when it came to run blocking grade. He had a meaningfully higher, like double Ifedi's pass blocking grade. And that kind of matches my eye from a pass blocking. He's definitely a better pass blocker than Ifedi. But if he's really atrocious at run blocking, I definitely would take that in general. I think that that's the right trade-off to make for a lot of reasons. But I want to make sure I don't want a guy that's the second worst at either, quite honestly. I'd like somebody who's just a better right tackle.
But if you had to pick.
If I had to pick, I'd pick Fant. And I'd pick a guy that was a more inferior run blocker, because there's a lot less damage that can be caused by mistakes in that situation.
Is anyone interested in seeing Ethan Posick get a run here? Like, I have not been impressed with him at left guard. I don't know. Like, I haven't been impressed with Odiambo either, and Fluker and Sweezy aren't healthy, but like, there's other options to move around here, right?
Yeah, that's the big question right now, because they keep talking about cohesion and having the same 5 guys the whole camp, and the Tom Cable thing was like moving guys around every 2-3 days, and that drove like all the O-line purists crazy. But if you got to get your best 5 on the field, yeah, maybe you do start looking at guys around. And one of the stories of the week that also jumped off our eye, and some people have had different views of this, was J.R. Sweezy has been practicing at left guard. And Pete revealed today that he's coming back from a high ankle sprain. I don't know if that was out there before this week.
Yeah.
And he mentioned pretty clearly that he's competing with with Posick. And yeah, some people, Posick's pass blocking has been a lot better than his run blocking, which the core strength is going to be a problem for him. He's just, even though he's put on the weight, that's just not something you can just pick up and get. Although he is bigger and he does seem to be better at pass pro. But my initial read, and I might be wrong based on what Pete said, was I thought because of how bad Reese Odiambo looked and how bad Michael Roos looked. Is it Michael or Jordan Roos? Michael Roos is the old tackle in Tennessee.
Yeah.
My guess was they just needed a left guard, but the fact that he singled out Posick, maybe he is under pressure.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt that he's under pressure, and I think it's primarily about getting the best 5 out there, and I think there's a decent chance that Sweezy is a better guard than Ethan Posick is. There's a question for me about Posick's a second-year player. Is he improved? Is his trajectory, is he developing? And are you going to stunt him? And at what cost? Is Sweezy a long-term solution? So I have some of those questions. But then to Nathan's question before, I saw Posick at right tackle last year in training camp. And from a pass blocking perspective, he is better than Ifedi at right tackle. I saw him going against people like Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett, and like in 1v1s, and was a clear difference between him and someone like Ifedi. I don't think he's as good of a pass blocker as George Fant is. Not that Fant is like going to set the world on fire, but I have a hard time seeing Posick beating out Ifedi. I think the more interesting question starts to become like, if Fant really is coming on and it looks like he's gonna win that spot, do they put Ifedi at some of these guard situations to push there? Not right away. I don't think there's enough time for all of that to happen, but could Ifedi end up being a left guard? I don't know. I'm kind of curious how that would play out.
Yeah, and the one thing you did notice when how bad some of their backup offensive line has looked, because when Bruce had to come in for Fluker last week when he hurt his finger, that right side completely fell apart pretty quickly. And so they're searching for depth options. They're pretty thin right now with Jamarco Jones hurt. So they really, I think whoever wins the right tackle battle, I would have Will Dissly lined up right beside them, and I'm not letting any of them in a one-on-one situation until they can prove it. Because week one, you got Von Miller lines up against the right tackle. That's his position. And you saw what Melvin Ingram did to him. Von Miller is the next level up. So if it's a Fetty or Fant or Posick, you need a lot of help there.
So let me ask you guys: do you feel like we have a better chance, an appreciably better chance, to beat the Broncos week one in Denver with George Fant at right tackle than we do with Jermaine Ifedi?
Yeah,
you do.
Yeah, I mean, the Dissly thing that you just threw out there was interesting. He'll be able to help either one on a pass play if they want to do that with them. I think it's fair to wonder how much value you get out of keeping a blocker in as opposed to letting them get out in a route and giving your quarterback another option. But where I think Dissly can swing things is if Fant is not a very good run blocker, I think Dissly can help there and make up for that. Whereas Fant as a pass blocker can do some stuff on his own. Maybe he can't handle Von Miller on his own. Not a lot of guys can, but maybe he can let that tight end get out into a route. Whereas with Ifedi, you're going to be more hamstrung and you're going to have to keep Dissly in or whatever. So you went out and got a blocking tight end, put him to use. You don't need to have a really good run blocking tackle. I mean, running isn't that important, and if you have someone that can be there next to him and help him with the run blocking, and Fant can hold his own in the pass blocking, I think that's a much better combination going into week one or any week for that matter.
So it just seems none of us think Jermaine Ifedi should be starting week one. I think that's not unreasonable.
Well, what's frustrating is he hasn't been good, so we have a lot of track record to say he's not good, and has he shown any improvement? Is there anything that anyone sees from him in the preseason where it's like, oh, well, he's better here?
I will say that, yes, not in ways that I think people are going to really. No, it's not going to change anyone's mind, but I have seen an improvement in terms of the penalty situation. We'll see in a regular season game. I know that in the scrimmage, Pete, called him out, but he hasn't been a major problem that way so far. It seems like there's more focus there. I saw a meaningful improvement from his mentality from year one to year two. This is going into last year, in terms of how much he was getting baited. When Frank Clark him and knocked him to the ground, he did not go after him and start like in year one. He was starting fights all the time.
He didn't go after Clark because he was knocked out on the ground. It's hard to go after somebody when you're out cold.
I'm just saying he did not start anything. He was not going after people last year. It was a notable difference compared to where he was in year one, where literally almost every other practice he was getting sent off because he was getting into a scuffle with somebody. So I've seen some maturity growth. It seems like a period of maturity growth. I did see last year some reach blocks that he was making in the run game that were pretty impressive. And he was sealing the edge on those. All these are they're not enough. They're not nearly enough to make up for the serious flaws in his game that are, really risking the Seahawks in all sorts of like pretty serious ways.
Yeah, and the worst part about this is it was so projectable. Like anyone who watches college tape
It was
you can see this coming from a mile away. And the thing that worries me about him is just the things that he struggles with are not the things you can teach. His technique could get better, but like the snowball effect where when he makes one mistake, it just keeps rolling down. And the stuff Cliff Averill was saying, I just don't know if you can teach that with a new coach, because the rest of the line seems to be progressing. And you're only as strong. It's a cliche as hell, but you're only as strong if you have one major weak link on your line. It could break everything down. And you saw it with Melvin Ingram last week. He was just abusing him. So I guess we should shift back to the Chargers game a little bit. There was a lot of interesting developments from that. The score, I don't put too much stock in the score. I more care about the guys who are going to play. How do they look? And I don't know about you guys, but to me, I was intrigued by Russell Wilson. I thought the deep play action passing game looked fantastic. I thought he had some interesting wide receiver stuff. David Moore looked really good. Jerron Brown looked really good. For a group that looked like a complete disaster entering camp, 1-6 or 1-5, they look pretty interesting now. And they're doing this without Baldwin, without Lockett in play. So for me, that was my big takeaway. I thought Russell looked great. I know they didn't score any touchdowns down there. They fumbled at the goal line, and there were some weird formations down there. But I thought the deep play action passing, that was the standout from the game. How about you guys?
Nathan, you want to go first?
Yeah. Shoddy has there's the good and bad, and the good is all the play action stuff. It's great. The bad is running.
Say why. I saw
play
you.
Action stuff?
Yeah, I saw you say I think I'm falling in love with Shoddy's play action stuff or something. Say why.
Well, play action is just good. It works really well. Quarterbacks pass much better out of play action, and with the way that with the personnel packages that Shoddy wants to run, these not always heavier sets, but I guess anymore, 21 personnel where you've got your standard I formation or whatever, that is a heavy set in kind of today's NFL. So he's setting the defense up, and then I think he's playing to. He's using his tendencies against the defense, and he's playing to Russell's strengths, and he's playing to some of the strengths of these wide receivers and stuff. And he's finding ways to get these tight ends who aren't exactly great, but he's kind of scheming them with the play action to stress the linebackers and find big open spaces for them. So all the play action stuff is really fantastic, and they've been doing it a lot, and it's worked really well. Now, the bad is how he wants to handle short yardage situations, right? Those goal line plays were terrible, and not because Chris Carson fumbled, right? You have to help your running back and your offensive line out. You can't put 0 wide receivers on the field. You just have too many bodies, and he got stuffed every time. And the fumble was a little bit of bad luck, but it wasn't good process that got them there. And so when they go into those short yardage situations, they have to spread it out a little bit. You got to put a wide receiver on the field. You love I formation, fine. Stay in your I formation and stuff. But those jumbo sets on short yardage stuff is going to be a problem all year long if that's what they want to do.
Did you hear the Schottenheimer press conference by any chance, or his comments about the goal line?
No, I've actually been in radio silence on everything that's not worked for 2 days. So
yeah, I kind of hear you. So I did manage on my walk to work. I listened to, I think it was this morning, I listened to his press conference, and he had a couple interesting comments about the goal line. So one, he was like, you only get 16 goal line plays a year, or I think what he said. You just don't get that many chances to practice, and you definitely don't get them as much in preseason or something to that effect. So they were trying something there.
But shouldn't you practice what you're going to do?
Well, yeah. So they were trying something, and he said, I don't think I ever heard Darrell Bevell say this, by the way. The first thing he said was there was a scheme error, a scheme problem with the first play we ran. We asked Dwayne Brown to do a block that was just not realistic, and that play never had a chance to really succeed. And so we saw it, we learned from it. We're not going to do that again. That was on us. I don't think I ever heard Darrell Bevell say that about any play. I don't know. Do you guys recall? We messed up on the coach's side on that one. We called. Can you guys remember something like that?
No, and they put their players. I mean Cable more than Bevel, but they put their players in their offensive linemen in a lot of really impossible situations over the years. So that's really cool to hear because they consistently asked their guys to do things that were not setting them to succeed and never talked about it and continued to do it. So that's cool.
Yeah, and he said on the second one, I can't remember exactly what he said, but yeah, they're definitely. I agree with everything you said, Nathan. And, from a player perspective, one, Chris Carson can't fumble it like that. He fumbled on 2 consecutive plays. This is a problem that he had at one point at Oklahoma State and then made some corrections and didn't fumble the rest of his time there. He's going to be asked to take the ball in tight spaces, for short yardage in certain situations, and he's got to secure that. So that was alarming. Hopefully I wouldn't say alarming. I think it was an opportunity that came up that he clearly has to pay attention. Hopefully he'll make the changes he needs to make so that doesn't happen again. Trey Madden also, from a fullback perspective, got destroyed in those plays. Like he was not effective at all. I don't think Trey Madden had a very good game in general. He had a penalty on special teams. I thought he had a decent first week. I did not think he had a very good week last week. So that also stood out to me. Shoddy said a couple other things in that press conference, but while you were talking about the goal line, I wanted to bring that up. So
were you at all alarmed by Shoddy saying like they had a scheme error on probably the most simple play you can design, like 1st and goal from the 1?
No, because I didn't take it that way. That was like, oh yeah, we don't know what we're doing. And to some extent, I find it refreshing, even if that was the case, because I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome and all sorts of jobs in the world where people don't want to admit that they're learning and they're trying things, right? But look, the fact that he acknowledges that something that they tried didn't work, that's what's important to me. Because as Nathan talks about from a process perspective, then I trust that they're going to identify and not be blind to the mistakes that they make, correct them, and get better from them. If they come back and try to do the same thing, I'd be much more concerned about that.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Okay.
But I mean, the problem where there wasn't some specific thing about the play they called in Dwayne Brown's assignment. I mean, there may have been that, but the problem was, beyond that too. Like, even if you like jumbo packages, are we really going to be taking Doug off the field in those situations?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why I agree with your point there. And
yeah. So it's good that he went out and acknowledged that. And it's good that they're practicing stuff, I guess, but practice what you're actually going to do. And yeah, you don't have Doug right now and you don't have Tyler right now, but I don't know. I feel better in some respects. I'm glad he's open and honest, and I'm glad that they're looking at situations the situations they put their players in. But there's a philosophical issue there that he has done. So they did that. If I remember right, they didn't have a wide receiver on any of those goal line plays. And then the previous game when they had the 4th and 1, they went jumbo there as well, no wide receiver. Maybe one on that one, I don't remember. But again, just way too heavy sets, and we've seen that consistently. So that's something to watch out for, and hopefully they adapt.
What else stood out to you about the Chargers game other than those things with the shoddy stuff?
Rasheem Green is still great. Jaron Brown looked good. David Moore had that everything. So the big bomb was okay. Awesome job by him. I don't want to take away from him. He fought like hell, but to actually get that ball, that Chargers defender made a mistake, and David Moore was there and he capitalized on it, and that was awesome. But a little fluky. That next play though, the one after that took them right down to the 1, that was thing of beauty from the route where he took an outside release and then cut it back in to catch that to the athleticism, the physicality, the strength once he had the ball and he like carries that guy down to the like that was it's one play, it's preseason, yada 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 yada, but like that was an incredibly impressive play. So all that stuff was really cool. I think just generally the wide receivers showed up a lot better. Everyone not named Brandon Marshall, and that was cool to see. I'm not like excited about this group yet, but it's cool that the depth. They're starters right now, but you know once the top guys get healthy, that they have this kind of interesting depth. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, I thought Brian made a good point in one of his articles recently, where last year the fourth and fifth receivers, or if someone got hurt, were Tanner McAvoy and Darbo, who probably shouldn't be making this team. It seems like they have really upgraded the bottom of the group. So 1 to 6 or 1 to 5, they do look a lot better depth wise. Maybe not. I don't know if you can replace the numbers P. Rich had in his contract here, but
I do.
Like, yeah,
I do. I absolutely do. I think Paul Richardson had a good year. I think he's a fine player. I wish him well. I think he's way overvalued by a lot of Seahawks fans, and that especially the bearded gentleman in the lower corner there. And I think there's a lot of guys that are going to be able to make downfield plays in this group, and more than make up for the 6 touchdowns that P. Rich had last year. So I've been pretty consistent. I like this group. Even Brandon Marshall, who has not looked like he can sustain meaningful speed on the field yet, and there's definitely reason to be questioning that. He drew a 20 or 30 yard pass interference on one play. He had Russell throwing to his left and drawing that to his 6'5" receiver, and then you had him throwing to Jaron Brown, who, guys, I mean, he's looking like he could be a real contributor this year. I think Jaron Brown by himself may come pretty close to Paul Richardson's numbers this year. And so went to 6'5" on the left, then he went to 6'3" Jaron Brown on the right. That was interesting. And then you didn't have Doug or Tyler playing in that game. So I think that was pretty impressive to see. You had Russell Wilson that midway through the second quarter, he was averaging, his yards per attempt was 21.4. Like, this wasn't like after the first series. This is like into the third series. He's averaging over 20 yards a throw. Like, I feel like people left that game with this, oh yeah, Seahawks are crappy. They're going to not do that well. The offense didn't convert in the red zone. Like, I feel like I watched a very different game. They got down the field in 3 plays on the first drive and should have had a touchdown, except Disley had, a bad choice block. The play was good. It executed really well. And it was legitimate the way they got down there. Next series, they went 77 yards. The next series, they went 72 yards. David Moore was like a half an inch from scoring on his catch. You had Carson fumble. Like, yes, there were some mistakes, but I'm much more interested in sustainable, repeatable offense. And sure, David Moore made a super lucky catch that's not sustainable and reasonable or repeatable. But I thought Russell looked good. I thought there were some decent ways that they were able to move that ball around. And I was encouraged by what I saw from the first team offense. The defense was a little bit more concerning to me, and continues to be, a question mark. I'm super interested to see what a combination of Rasheem Green and Frank Clark look like as a starting duo at the end position. I think that's their strongest pairing. I think Quentin Jefferson played really well, but Quentin Jefferson to me is a better run defender than he is a pass rusher. Rasheem Green is, I think, a better pass rusher than Quentin Jefferson, and is a pretty darn good run defender as well. So I'd love to see that happen this week, for them to really give him an opportunity to stand out. Last thing I'll say about the Chargers game, and I'm probably lying because I'll think of something else, but I'm back to being like not on the Tedrick Thompson bandwagon. Like, I'm not seeing that guy make plays. I'm not seeing him anticipate. I'm not seeing him be impactful. I think we're in trouble in our safety spot. I really do. And I don't see an answer coming along anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think one of my big takeaways from the game was you really saw how much they miss Earl Thomas. And just the speed you mentioned with Tedrick, his speed just doesn't show up. He doesn't flash. They didn't hit too many deep balls. It was mostly the way Rivers moves down the field is in dinking and dunking. But man, run support, you really miss Earl. You really miss him as a tackler. It's so noticeable that he's not out there. And yeah, Tedrick's play, maybe it's coming in practice, but he's not flashing.
Hard to really evaluate him though without the all 22.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that is fair. I think there's been a number of plays where he's been in a trailing position in a 1v1, on a tight end or a back. He's not getting there in time. I've yet to see him make a positive play, right? Anticipating a ball, knocking it down, bringing a receiver down as soon as they get the ball. It's been a little while since that Charger game, and there's been a lot that's gone through my head. But my recollection is seeing players catch the ball and running away from him and, getting meaningful yards after the catch. And so Earl Thomas is a guy that shuts things down. People aren't running by him. That is not something that we haven't had an issue with. So
we have to kind of leave that behind. Like, we're never going to be happy if we compare everyone to Earl. Right. I mean, the question isn't, is he Earl? The question is he a competent starting safety? I haven't seen enough either way to say, and I think it's hard to really, with his role, it's hard to pass too much judgment either way with, like I said, without seeing the all 22. I mean, in the first preseason game, he had a nice play where a back got loose and he came down and made a nice tackle. It wasn't anything splashy. It wasn't a huge hit, but he came flying down full speed, caught the running back full speed, tripped him up. I think it was still, one where the back got the first down. It might have been Chris Michael, right? If I remember right. But anyways, it was a nice play. It wasn't Earl Thomas, right? Maybe Earl stops it earlier. Maybe Earl comes in and has a big hit, right? Tedrick's probably not going to come flying in and knock balls out on the goal line and stuff like that. But everyone's going to fall short of Earl.
That's fine, but he's not even making Jordan Babineau plays at this point yet. But
it's, again, totally different role, right? Like, if Jordan Babineau was asked to do what Tedrick's doing, we might see teams pushing it down the field a lot more, right? And you can't just say because they're not going downfield that Tedrick's doing a good job, right? It's really a black box at this point. I think there's stuff that we can see, but to pass a real judgment on him at this point, it just is difficult.
Yeah, I'm losing confidence. That's where I am with it right now. I'm not seeing flashes of plays that give me more confidence in him. I'm seeing things that give me less confidence. So time will tell. I would love for I guess you're not saying that I'm wrong, but I hope that I am wrong and that we'll see something great come from him. But honestly, I do think that you see plays from players that make plays. I'll give you a footballism. Even in preseason, if you're gonna flash, it's gonna show. And there's enough passes going on in that game, and I just didn't see it from him. So,
I mean, I think the thing with Tedrick is if you think about it in terms of, well, if he gets 4 or 5 or 6 picks this year, that'd be great, right? I think everyone's gonna be pretty happy about it. Playing that position's a lot more than just getting interceptions, but that's probably pretty indicative of a solid year from him. And if you think of that, if he gets 5 picks this season, that's 1 every 3 games, right? He's played 2 so far in the preseason. What is concerning is I haven't seen him come close to a pick yet. I haven't seen him being involved in a play really like that yet. And so that's concerning. But again, yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not a Tedrick truther.
I am enjoying this, but I wanted to push you to where you're gonna actually really go after.
I'm gonna defend Tedrick and appeal to authority. If Pete is happy with him, And Pete's been happy with safeties in the past that did not work out. But it sounds like everything right now is okay. And like I feel like that's kind of one of Pete's pet positions. And that they're not freaking out about it is probably a good thing.
I don't think they have an option. What else are they going to do? Like, is he going to say, "Oh my God, the sky is falling. Tedrick Thompson sucks, so we're going to put in Lorenzo Jerome"?
Jerron Johnson just got signed by the Cowboys. They didn't rush out and grab him.
Dang.
What's Deion Bailey up to? He's still out there, probably, right?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
I mean, they're not doing anything crazy. Like, on the offensive line, like they're getting Fant at right tackle and they're putting Sweezy at left guard, right? Like those are things where they're clearly showing. I don't know if concern is too strong of a word, but the willingness to tinker. And we're not seeing McDougald at free safety and Hill or somebody else at strong safety. We're not seeing Trey Flowers, and I know Trey Flowers, they want to turn him into a corner, and that'll make sense. But like they're not doing anything where they're going to tinker with Trey Flowers at safety. I mean, they've been steady here. They don't have a lot of options, but they do have some options, and they're not giving those a run, right? Like I guess is Mo Alexander, he's back, right?
Yeah, and in fact, Bradley McDougald is out for tomorrow's game, so the starting safety combination is going to be Tedrick and Maurice Alexander. So we'll get a long look at Mo Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. You would think that McDougald and Alexander is a potential duo that they could go with, and injuries have kind of kept that from happening. I know that at one point they were doing that a little bit, so maybe that is a bad sign, but I don't know. We'll see.
What do you guys make of Dante Johnson?
Totally glad you brought that up. That's what I was thinking.
Dante Johnson is going to get a lot of snaps this week. I believe Maxwell's out. Trey Flowers. It seems like Trey Flowers and him might be in competition for the right corner spot. And Trey's been okay. He hasn't made any plays on the ball, but he's been fine. As for a 5th-round rookie transitioning. But Dante Johnson, the second half of that game, was one of the bright spots. And yeah, with Maxwell out this week, I think he's going to get a lot of runs. So is he a guy you guys think can play, or is he more of a depth guy?
This is your guy, right, Brian?
I've been excited to see what he could do. He if you look at Pro Football Focus, I mean, he was like one of the worst rated cornerbacks in football last year on San Francisco. So, and 49ers fans, like, not big on Dante Johnson. They were happy to see him go. I've always liked his athletic profile. He's got decent size. He's 6 foot, 6'1" even. He's pretty strong. Is limited reps in this first game, so we'll kind of see. I definitely want to see him again and again and get some more reps, and I think that'll happen in this game. What I saw made me feel more confident in his ability to play that position than Trey Flowers. If you're going to be talking about a starting outside corner, I'm as I've said before, I'm positive about what Trey Flowers has done. I think it's a good sign. I think this is a developmental year for Trey Flowers. He's on the field. I think that we're in trouble. I don't think that he's ready to handle regular season starting responsibilities. So Dante Johnson's a guy that's been around the league, and yeah, I am excited to see more of him tomorrow. I'm not assuming that means he's going to end up being the starter. I think we'll see what happens with this Maxwell groin. It is concerning that he's missed now all 3 preseason games, and with Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie now signed, and other guys, Scandrick signed, and whatever, it doesn't feel like they're going to bring in another veteran corner to challenge Maxwell. So it's either probably Dante Johnson or Maxwell for that position.
Yeah, I just wish we were talking about these two guys the same way we're talking about like Stringfellow and David Moore, or I'm excited to see these guys and that they're interesting. And Trey Flowers is the 5th. Like, I'll do the disclaimer on Trey Flowers. He's a 5th-round pick. It's cool that he's out there starting, doing as well as he is, but it's not like I don't think he's meeting NFL starter like that bar. So I'm excited to see what they do because they really need someone to do something. But it's a little scary right now. I don't know. The secondary is
Bad. It's bad.
Yeah. It has the bad potential for sure.
Does it have good potential?
It does. I think.
What does that look like? What does that look like?
I think Tedrick is a starter caliber guy. I think he's what you hope he is, and that he kind of ball hawks and stuff and whatever. He's not going to be a star, but I think if he is solid to good, that's good. McDougald, maybe he can kind of take a step and be not a star again, but a really good player. You need Coleman to keep up his level of play. I think that he really is performing at a really high level for a nickel. Quill take the next step, and then it's Trey Flowers and Dante Johnson. Can you get one of those guys to pop for you, or can Maxwell come back and be serviceable? And then it's a lot of ifs. But each individual if doesn't feel like that big of a stretch. Getting them all to happen at the same time, pretty low probability. But
I'm going to go out
there.
I'm going to go out there and say that I think there's a real chance for this secondary to end up with 5 interceptions or less collectively.
Is that a pass rush issue or just pure?
I think it's across it's both, but I'm just even talking from ability to make plays. Shaquille Griffin had 1 interception last year. We've talked about that as a place where he needs to make progress. Maybe Byron Maxwell, if he's definitely been a guy that's been able to create some turnovers, at least like forced fumbles, things like that. But if he's not there, questionable. Justin Coleman is the guy that made a couple plays last year from a turnover perspective. Bradley McDougald is not a ball hawk. He's not a guy creating a bunch of turnovers. I'd like to say that Tedrick Thompson is. Let me see it. I've yet to see it. For me to go in, I'm an optimistic guy in general, but we're talking about a guy that has 0 career interceptions, right? And so now we're going to predict that he has. That's my concern. Is that the upside for this secondary? If they all play above their career averages, then maybe there's 7 to 10 picks.
Well, it's not just about these guys don't have a back of the baseball card or whatever, right? Quill has 1 year, Thompson has no years, Hill has no years, McDougald has a few, Coleman has a couple now, but there's youth here, and you can always be optimistic about youth. What about Akeem King? We haven't even talked about him. Everybody's favorite.
I think he's
okay. Well, we can get to King in a second, but to look at this from a different perspective, though, the offense could help them in that regard, right? Turnovers, I think, have a lot to do with game script. If the offense can force games to be high scoring, force the opposing teams to pass and keep up with them, then you have a better shot, regardless of overall performance. I think you're going to see more opportunities, at least for the secondary, to get picks. If this offense isn't very good and they're behind, then even getting 5 turnovers out of this secondary could be tough. So I think a lot rides there too.
Their best chance of turnovers might be Michael Dixon's wonky, wobbly punts. People seem to not be able to catch those.
If Nico Thorpe is recovering muff punts, does that count as a turnover in the secondary?
No. Oh. No, it does not. You two.
Their best chance.
Jeff, can we I really feel the absence of Evan right now. We've managed to get Nathan to be the positive one on the podcast. How did that happen? I feel like we should take a bow.
Well, let's just bring up Michael Dixon. I think that'll switch fast.
I bet he's even positive about Mike. How can you not be positive about the #1 punter in the NFL?
He does look pretty good.
Yeah, right?
Wow,
I'm mad. It's still a punter, and punters are dumb, but he does look like relative to other punters.
Yeah, I think his punts were pretty damn sexy in that game. And based on the conversation we've been having, we are going to need every net yard that he can create going into this year for sure.
All right, let's change. We've been on for an hour. Seahawks have a game tomorrow. They play the third game is probably the most interesting of all the preseason games from the standpoint. You'll see the most from the starters. I think they said Russell's going to go into the third quarter, and Shoddy was talking about coming out of halftime and how important that is. So the Seahawks tomorrow are up against Minnesota, probably top to bottom, the best roster in the NFL. They were a good roster last year. They added Kirk Cousins to replace Case Keenum. They had our old friend Sheldon Richardson, who replaced Tom Johnson and Shamar Steven. They seem pretty happy about that. They got Pro Bowlers all over on defense. What are you looking to see in this game tomorrow? Brian, we'll start with you. What's the thing against a team that probably is a Super Bowl contender? What's the key things for this game?
Oh, they're definitely I think they're number second in the odds to win the Super Bowl. Like they're way up there. They're my Super Bowl pick. I think they're really, really well constructed team across the board. Look, if the starting offense can score 10 or more points against this defense, that will equal success to me on the offensive side. I think this is a really, really good defense, and that's not saying anything shocking, but I'd like to see. Number one thing I'm looking for is George Fant at right tackle. Almost full stop. Like, if he can look like, I hope that he is going to they're going to swap series by series or something like that and not wait until like the second quarter to put Fant in. I'd like to see Fant with the ones. I'd like to see if he looks any more capable than Ifedi, and I think he will. I would love to see if Chris Carson is able to be productive. One thing we didn't talk about as much, we talked about his fumbles, but man, on that opening drive, that touchdown run that got called back, that was a nice run. And the run before that, when he went to the right side, nice run. Like, I continue to believe this guy can be a real star, and I'm interested to see how he plays against this group. And interesting to know that DJ Fluker is going to play in this game. They were talking about his dislocated finger. They weren't sure, but he's going to play. So, yeah, it's mainly about the offense and how that group plays together. And then, I don't think any of us would be shocked that Rasheem Green, if he's not starting, I'm going to be really frustrated. Like now is the time to see if he can climb into that role. It's like Russell Wilson in Game 3 of the preseason in 2012. That was when he got his chance to play with the starters, and they made the switch. And don't put in Quentin Jefferson or Brandon Jackson. Like, don't do that. Like, give Rasheem Green the chance to prove that he can be a difference maker with the ones. There's so much more to gain from them taking that route than sitting on the bench for 2 quarters or a quarter and a half while Brandon Jackson's getting snaps.
Yeah, Green looks like a first round talent, and coming out of the draft, people thought he was raw, but this isn't a Nick Reed situation where he's just some 250 pounders beating up on third stringers. You're seeing transferable traits with whether it's the hand usage or just the athletic ability, his arms. He looks like a first round kind of talent. So yeah, you want to see him against the ones, and if the Vikings do have one weakness, it is their O-line. They're kind of moving guys around right now. They have a lot of injuries and a lot of questions there. But yeah, I think if you're right, what are you hoping to see out of Brandon Jackson at this point? You know what you have. You know what you have in Quentin Jefferson to an extent.
I don't know. Like,
to an extent.
I mean, I want to. Well, yeah, no, I know what you mean, but I want to see Green against the ones too, because I want to see good players play against good players. But I think Green's far from proven or anything like that, but he's looked fantastic. Like, but if with Richardson, or sorry, not Richardson, Jefferson, and Brandon Jackson, I think there's a question about what exactly are they against starters. Like, Green, maybe he doesn't translate this year against starters and he struggles a little bit when it comes to regular season or whatever. That's fine. He's a rookie. He looks amazing. He's got all, like you said, all these traits that absolutely should translate. So there's not a lot of questions there. It's just with him, it's just time. But with Quentin Jefferson, if you're going to talk about like, well, who are you going to roster? What are you going to do if Deion Jordan can come back a couple weeks into the season, don't you kind of want to know what it is that Quentin Jefferson can do against starters? If you see Quentin Jefferson go out and beat up third stringers, like that doesn't help you make that decision. And same for Brandon Jackson. And these are guys that have been around, so they don't have and played regular season NFL games. So there's not a ton of questions about them, but I get why they might be more interested right now in seeing some of those kind of almost bubble guys against that top level of competition.
Do you think, though, Nathan, that the fact that Quentin Jefferson and Brandon Jackson got starters reps last week and were rotating against starters, and I think the first week, they've gotten some of that view? We haven't seen, like, Rasheem Green got one of his sacks. I think
Green got a little run with the first teams.
I think in the first game, Rasheem Green got one of his sacks against, I think, whoever was starting, on the line for Indianapolis. But Jefferson and Jackson were getting almost all the snaps around in the first quarter of this game against the Chargers.
Well, and so there's something else interesting that I don't know if, again, I went dark the last few days with work stuff, but Quentin Jefferson's getting a lot of run at 5-tech. Like he's getting that
exclusively now.
Exclusively, I think he played some defensive tackle, didn't he?
There was one play for sure where I saw him at defensive tackle in a pass rush situation, like the second half or something like that.
Yeah.
But
in week 1, he definitely got run all over the place. I didn't track him too closely in week 2, but he got that they're looking at bringing that back. So that's another thing where, I mean, I get it. I want to see Rasheem Green, like he's super exciting, but I get why they might keep going with what they've kind of been doing. And I think you find, if you can find ways with if there's like NASCAR package situations and then you get Green on the field against the ones, and then cool. But I think they're experimenting a little bit and kind of seeing what they have there. And I get that.
How good do you guys think Poona Ford could be?
He had a play. Actually, I don't even know if he was the one that made the play, but there was one where he got into the backfield and the running back was like dancing and juking and jiving. And I don't think Poona actually made this play, but Poona was like mirroring him. Like he looked as agile and like twitchy as the running back did, which is not something that you expect from a guy that size. But his testing, like I want to say he was a force player, which is an athletic profile for pass rushers. Justice Mosqueda, who's a great follow on Twitter, he does that analysis. I want to say that Poona was a force player, or at the very least, he tested extremely well. So he's exciting. Like he's a one tech. He's a big body. Like so, there's only so much upside there probably, but he's not like Colin Cole or a guy like that. He's really interesting.
I remember Tom Herman, who was his coach at Texas, who was on one of the local radio stations, and he's been around college football forever. He's been around some of those good Ohio State teams, and he said Poona Ford's going to be a 10-year player in the NFL. He said there's only like 2 other defensive tackles he's seen that are that active, and while he doesn't have a body that looks like an NFL player, he said he's the kind of guy who's going to come in, sort of what I think Brett Bielema said about Russell Wilson. He predicted like a week after the draft that this guy's going to come in and just dominate. And he's been playing against lesser players, but he looks like a guy who I want to see him make the team.
One question I had for you guys that someone asked on Twitter was whether you think that there's a chance that we're talking about the safety spot. Any chance they'll look at someone like Eric Reed?
They should. They won't. I mean, this isn't about football. It's not about football with any team at this point, right? It's about him kneeling during the anthem, and so they should. No, they won't. I think that Colin Kaepernick situation kind of told us what they thought.
I think if they were going to do that, they should have done it in July, and now you miss a whole training camp and preseason. I think it's just I don't think there's value in that. Bring him in now unless there's an injury.
I know we're running late, but one other thing that came up in the Schottenheimer thing we haven't talked about CJ Procise.
Oh yeah.
He made it through a game. Ended up being the leading receiver in that game, and had a couple runs. And it was interesting. Ryan Cleveland, I think, joined for the live show last week. He's one of the Hawk Blogger patrons, and his impression of Procise was that he wasn't as flashy, or didn't feel like he showed as much burst as he had in the past. I actually was pretty pleased with what I saw from Procise. And what Schottenheimer said is, if anyone has any doubt about Procise making the roster, Schottenheimer went on and on about how unique his skill set was, how he wanted to feature him, how all he heard about when he arrived was to put on tape of Procise and what he's done, and how he's a unique matchup nightmare, and all the stuff we've heard about Procise forever. But Schottenheimer went on and on about it. So he made the point the issue with him is consistency. I think we'd all say it's durability, but I thought that was positive, and I am really interested to see. He's going to get a lot of reps tomorrow, because we also didn't mention J.D. McKissick. Broke his hand, and or is that right? And is that his foot?
Foot.
Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks. So, Procise will get more
running
reps.
back got hurt.
I was going to ask you guys. We haven't talked about McKissick yet. He's gone 4 to 6 weeks. What do you do with him? Do you bring him on the roster, or do you IR him, or do you just cut him, assume no one's going to pick him up, and bring him back when he's healthy? He kind of makes the composition of that position a little more interesting.
I think all the other injuries, I guess it's just Penny.
Your favorite
Penny. What's that?
Your favorite first-round rookie.
I know. You know what? CJ Procise is injured too. He might not be injured now, but he will be. He's
oh, come on, man.
He's just
It's so hard.
He's always all right. So random thought. I wonder if having a new coaching staff helps Procise, in that they're not maybe burnt out on him being hurt all the time and still like more intrigued. But I don't know. It's a little harder now to carry McKissick if he's hurt, and then Penny is hurt, and then Procise is a walking injury waiting to happen. Like, it feels like you kind of need a little bit of reliability back there. I don't know who the guy, like Mike Davis is good enough that I think that you probably go with that, and then so if they're the roster crunch, it's just hard to see them without other more reliable backs in the mix to keep someone that's already hurt.
So I would actually say that I think they would keep McKissick and cut Mike Davis. But what I would have to do to really be sure about or have more confidence in that is look at the other places in the roster where there's injury, because I think there might be special team shortage. If they end up keeping Deion Jordan, even if he's a couple weeks out, that's a roster spot. If they keep Jamarco Jones on the 53-man so that they can put him on the injured reserve to return, that's another spot. Like, you're starting to add up.
Ed Dixon.
Ed Dixon maybe. Like, starting to add up a bunch of people that aren't ready. Like, maybe Doug actually can't play in week 1. Like, they have to field the special teams. So that's the factor to me that could push McKissick off the roster. I think I've been pretty consistent. I like Mike Davis. I'd be happy to have him on the roster if that's how it has to be. But I don't think there's a real risk of him getting scooped up and, you really regretting it if he goes and plays for another team. So McKissick, I do think, has enough value and he's young enough. I think there's a risk of putting him on the street and maybe he doesn't come back and you regret that down the road.
And the other guy I want to watch in this game, Nathan mentioned him earlier, Brandon Marshall. You keep hearing all this buzz about him from camp, and they keep saying how this is his best week. But, man, he doesn't look like he can run anymore. And can he sustain any speed? And I just want to see this translate, because we don't know if he's going to make the team based on how they've treated veterans and some of these young guys jumping him. But I want to see that if he can run at all.
He didn't look like he could run last year.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of question about that. I think the question is, can they find a way to use a guy that can't run? I think that's still maybe an open question. We haven't seen him I mean, why have a guy?
Keep going.
Why have a guy that specializes in the red zone, and then when you get down to the 1 yard line, you take your wide receivers off the field? Like, if that's what he's supposed to be, is this end zone threat?
Blocker too?
I don't know. He's a wide receiver. Like, he may be a good blocker, but he's a wide receiver. His number one job is to catch footballs, and if his number one job is to catch footballs in the end zone, then like you got to give him chances when you're on the 1 yard line. I don't know.
All right, fair. Nathan, who are your guys you want to see?
Alex Magoo, the number one graded rookie this preseason so far. No, George Fant's the big one. I mean, I do want to see Alex Magoo. That's not a joke. George Fant is the big one. Not Marshall specifically, but Marshall and these wide receivers, just kind of getting more of a look at them. I know we talked about a lot of these guys, like the secondary. Can any of these corners look like they're ready to step up and be a starting NFL quarterback? Does Tedrick start sniffing around on some balls and stuff like that? Yeah.
It's been a long show.
That's going on the highlight reel.
I was like halfway through that sentence, so no. Anyways,
I'm 12 years old. Sorry. Go on.
Yep. And the whole thing, all preseason for me has been shoddy in what he's doing. I think we have a pretty good idea of it now, but just continuing to see that what he does and how he wants to call games, I think is going to be interesting to me all year long.
Yeah, those are good calls, especially Magoo, who Nathan was ahead of the curve on. We were all just writing him off after that first game, and Nathan was on board, and maybe Nathan should be the new quarterback scout for the Seahawks.
Clearly, they're doing a fine job at quarterback scout because they went and drafted Alex Magoo, so I don't think they need me.
He had a really good game. Like, he really did, and I would keep him over Austin Davis based on that game alone. That's how little I think of Austin Davis generally. I don't think Magoo showed a ton, but he had two great throws, like really great throws. And you could argue maybe he had three great throws in that game. The ones that stood out to me was the touchdown pass that he had. I mean, you couldn't have put it in a better spot, better timing. Malik Turner made the catch there. And then the other was that throw to Cyril Grayson for the 2-point conversion. I mean, he rifled that ball in there. He showed a really nice arm, and I was impressed. The other pass down the boundary to Cyril Grayson earlier in that drive was also the one that was pretty nice. But the other two in the end zone, those were big time throws. It was nice to see.
Yeah, I didn't realize he had such a live arm. I know they talked about how good he was at throwing from the move, but that really stood out.
And he's athletic too. I mean, he's not Russ, but he can move. And I don't think they've ran any read option with Russ. I could be wrong on that, but they've ran it a few times with him to varying success. But he can do it. I think he's exciting. He's a 7th round guy or whatever. He's not gonna win you football games today, but he's very interesting. He's a lot more interesting than a lot of guys on this team in past years and a lot of guys on other teams right now.
Well, if he makes it, I think there's a real shot that the entire draft class makes this roster. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
And I don't think we had this conversation a little bit on Twitter. I don't think that's because the Seahawks are super shitty. I think Jamarco Jones, if he was healthy, I think he would have made pretty much every roster we've had. I think, Rashad Penny would have. I think that Rasheem Green would have. I think that, go on down the line. I think Michael Dixon would have. I think Trey Flowers would have, other than maybe like the 2013, 2012 when they had so many corners. Jacob Martin, maybe. Like they are seeing him as a linebacker. They have not had a lot of depth at that position. I think he probably makes it in most years. Anyway, I think there's I'm not saying this is like a top end blowout like 2012 class. I think there's question about how good, how great these players are. There any all pros? Green seems to be the guy that has the highest upside. but it's looking like they've replenished the talent pool a little bit. And we'll see. It has to all play out, but I think there's some promising signs for sure.
I guess the one other story we really haven't hit on, and I don't want to spend much time on it, is Sebastian Janikowski won the kicking battle. Jason Myers was released this week, and I don't know how much I want to add, but did you see that picture Russell Wilson tweeted out where they had all 5 of the captains walk into the field from last game, and Janikowski looked bigger than Dwayne Brown? I don't think I've ever seen that before. Our kicker was significantly bigger than the left tackle, an all-pro left tackle. I haven't been able to stop looking at that picture.
He is a large man for sure.
I think there was a little bit of an angle issue with that picture, perhaps, because I don't think Janikowski's actually bigger than Brown. But I thought it was. I want to give the game ball to the team seamstress, who clearly made some adjustments to Janikowski's jersey. It was much trimmer and more becoming. I think he's rounding into shape. I heard Pete Carroll say that Janikowski's in great shape. You lose all credibility on determining fitness level when you make that comment. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to watching Janikowski this year. I actually think that could be a fun side story. All right, guys. We've been going at it for a while. It was great. I'm glad you guys were able to get together tonight. I'm looking forward to the game. I'm flying back from San Francisco tomorrow afternoon. Fingers crossed that I do not want to miss Seahawks preseason games, even a half. So looking forward to seeing you guys online. And then we'll talk again next week. We're getting closer and closer to the regular season. Next week, we're going to start talking about players that have been out potentially starting to work their way back to getting ready for regular season snaps. So a lot of stuff happening over the next few weeks. For patrons that have joined, thank you. For people that haven't joined the patron group, please go to patreon.com, patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up, get access to the private Facebook group. We do hangouts. A lot of times you'll be able to come on here and ask us questions. Bunch of fun, extra bonus stuff, and all the money goes to a great cause in Ben's fund. So please take a look. And with that, go Hawks, and have a great night, everybody.